March 17, 1957. 3:42 in the afternoon. Harlem. PS 194 on West 144th Street. The hallway smelled like chalk dust and floor wax. The building was mostly empty. School had let out 37 minutes ago. Most of the children were already home, already sitting at kitchen tables eating crackers and peanut butter, already forgetting about fractions and spelling tests. But one child was not home. One child was still inside that building. And one father, the most dangerous man in all of New York City, was walking through the front doors of that school because his daughter had not come home on time. Bumpy Johnson was not a man who panicked. He had stared down Dutch Schultz. He had survived Alcatraz. He had faced 12 armed killers in a basement and walked out without a scratch. He had built an empire out of nothing but loyalty, intelligence, and an iron will that could not be bent by any force on earth. But when it came to his daughter, when it came to Elise, Bumpy Johnson was a different man entirely. She was his heart walking outside his body. She was the only thing in this world that could make Bumpy Johnson afraid. And right now, at 3:42 in the afternoon on a cold March day in 1957, Bumpy was afraid. Not terrified, not yet, just that low hum of worry that starts in your chest and spreads outward like a slow fire. Because Elise was always home by 3:15. Always. She walked the 6 blocks from PS 194 to the apartment on Edgecombe Avenue every single day, rain or shine, and she was never late. Bumpy had made sure of that. He had eyes on every block between the school and his front door. Shoeshine boys, newspaper vendors, barbers standing in doorways, old women sitting on stoops. Every single one of them watched Elise walk home, and every single one of them would have laid down their lives before letting anything happen to that girl. But today Elise had not walked past any of them. Not the shoeshine boy on 143 Road. Not the barber on 142nd. Not Miss Lucille on the stoop at 141st who always waved and handed Elise a piece of butterscotch candy. None of them had seen her. Bumpy had called the apartment twice. No answer. He had called Maybelle, his wife, who was visiting her sister in Brooklyn. Maybelle had not heard from Elise either. That is when the hum in Bumpy's chest got louder. He put on his coat. He told Illinois Gordon to bring the car around. And he drove to PS 194. Bumpy walked through those front doors like he owned the building. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. The principal's office was dark. The classrooms were empty, but not all of them. At the far end of the second-floor hallway, a light was on. Room 214. Bumpy knew that room. It was Elise's classroom. Her teacher was a man named Gerald Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. That is what the children called him. He was 41 years old, thin, balding, wore wire-rimmed glasses and brown suits that looked like they had been purchased in 1943. He had been teaching at PS 194 for 6 years. He came from Connecticut. He had a degree from a small college nobody had ever heard of. He smiled too much. That was the thing people always said about Gerald Whitmore. He smiled too much and he was too friendly with the children. But nobody had ever said it loud enough for anyone important to hear. Because Gerald Whitmore was a white man teaching in a black school, and in 1957, white teachers in black schools were treated like missionaries. The school board loved them. The principal praised them. Parents were told to be grateful that a man like Mr. Whitmore had chosen to work in Harlem when he could have been teaching at some comfortable school in Westchester. Grateful. That was the word. Be grateful. And so nobody asked questions when Mr. Whitmore kept students after school for extra help. Nobody asked questions when he closed his classroom door during these sessions. Nobody asked questions when children came home quiet, withdrawn, different. Because asking questions about a white teacher in 1957 was not something black parents in Harlem felt they could do. The system was not built for their questions. The system was built to protect men like Gerald Whitmore. But the system had never met Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy reached the second floor. His shoes were silent on the linoleum now. He was not walking like a concerned parent anymore. He was walking like what he was. A predator. A man who had spent 30 years reading rooms, reading people, reading the invisible language of danger that most people never learn to speak. The hallway was empty. The light from room 214 spilled out through a half-open door. And then Bumpy heard something that stopped him dead in his tracks. His daughter's voice, small, frightened, a voice he had never heard her use before. "Please, Mr. Whitmore, I want to go home." Then another voice, Gerald Whitmore, soft, coaxing, the kind of voice that sounds gentle but carries something rotten underneath. "We are almost done, Elise. Just sit still. You are such a good girl." Bumpy Johnson pushed open that door. And what he saw in that room, what he witnessed in the space of 2 seconds, changed everything. Gerald Whitmore was sitting in his chair behind his desk. Elise was standing next to him. Whitmore's hand was on her body, in a place no adult hand should ever be on a child. Elise's eyes were wet. Her face was frozen in that particular expression that children wear when they do not understand what is happening to them, but they know it is wrong. They know it in their bones, in their blood, in every cell of their small bodies. They know it is wrong, but they do not have the words for it, do not have the power to stop it, do not have the ability to fight back against an adult who is supposed to protect them. Bumpy saw all of this in 2 seconds. 2 seconds that lasted a lifetime. 2 seconds that burned themselves into his memory like a brand pressed into flesh. 2 seconds that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Whitmore looked up. His hand jerked away from Elise like he had touched a hot stove. His face went from that sick, soft expression to pure terror in the span of a heartbeat. Because standing in that doorway was not just an angry father. Standing in that doorway was Bumpy Johnson. And Gerald Whitmore, despite his sheltered Connecticut upbringing, despite his comfortable ignorance of who really ran Harlem, knew that name. Everyone knew that name, Elise. Bumpy's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but underneath that gentleness was something that made the air in the room change. Made the temperature drop, made Gerald Whitmore's bladder loosen. "Come here, baby." Elise ran to her father. She buried her face in his coat. She was shaking, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Bumpy put his hand on her head, held her, did not look down at her, could not look down at her. Because if he looked at his daughter's face right now, if he saw the fear and the confusion and the violation in her eyes, he would kill Gerald Whitmore right here in this classroom. And Bumpy Johnson did not kill men in front of his daughter. "Go to the car, baby. Illinois is downstairs. Go sit in the car. Lock the doors. I will be right there." Elise looked up at him. Her eyes were asking a question she could not articulate. "Are you going to hurt him, Daddy?" That is what those eyes were asking. And the answer was yes. The answer was absolutely, unequivocally, without any doubt or hesitation, yes. But Bumpy just smiled, the warmest, most reassuring smile he had ever produced in his entire life. "Go on now, sweetheart. Everything is fine. I just need to talk to Mr. Whitmore about your grades." Elise left the room. Her small footsteps echoed down the hallway, down the stairs, out the front door. Illinois Gordon saw her coming. He opened the car door. He saw her face. And Illinois Gordon, a man who had killed 11 people in his life, felt his heart break. "What happened, baby girl?" Elise did not answer. She climbed into the back seat, pulled her knees to her chest, and stared at nothing. Illinois looked up at the school. 2nd floor, room 214. The light was still on. And Illinois understood. Upstairs, Gerald Whitmore was trying to talk. He was trying to explain. He was trying to use words, because words were the only weapon he had, and he was reaching for them desperately, the way a drowning man reaches for anything that floats. "Mr. Johnson, Bumpy, it is not what it looked like. I was helping her with her homework. She had a stain on her dress and I was just..." Bumpy closed the classroom door. Locked it. The click of that lock was the loudest sound Gerald Whitmore had ever heard. Bumpy pulled down the shade on the door's window. Then he turned around. He walked to Gerald Whitmore's desk slowly. Each step deliberate, each step measured. Whitmore scrambled backward. His chair rolled into the chalkboard. "Nowhere to go. Please, please, Mr. Johnson. I did not do anything wrong. I swear on my life." Bumpy stopped walking. He stood 2 feet from Whitmore. Close enough to smell the sweat pouring off the man. Close enough to see the vein pulsing in his temple. Close enough to watch his pupils dilate with pure, animal terror. "You swear on your life," Bumpy repeated. His voice was still quiet. Still controlled. But there was a tremor in it now, not fear, rage. The kind of rage that is so deep, so volcanic, that it goes past screaming, past violence, past anything recognizable as human emotion. The kind of rage that becomes cold, that becomes still, that becomes patient. Yes, yes, I swear, I would never, never what? Bumpy leaned forward. Never touch a child, never put your hands on a little girl who trusted you. Never use your position, your authority, your power over a child to do what I just saw you doing. Whitmore's mouth opened and closed. No words came out, because there were no words. There was no explanation. There was no excuse. There was only the truth of what Bumpy had seen with his own eyes, and no amount of stammering or lying or begging could erase that truth. Bumpy grabbed Whitmore by the collar of his cheap brown suit and lifted him out of his chair. Whitmore was 5'10", maybe 170 pounds. Bumpy was 5'7", but in that moment he might as well have been 10 feet tall. He held Whitmore up with one hand, feet barely touching the ground, and looked into his eyes. "How long?" Bumpy said. "How long what? How long have you been doing this? To my daughter, to other children, how long?" Whitmore started crying. Big, ugly, desperate tears. Not tears of remorse, tears of fear. The tears of a man who had spent years believing he was untouchable, believing that the system would always protect him, and who was suddenly realizing that the system meant nothing in this room. That the only thing that mattered in this room was the man holding him by the throat. "Please, I will leave. I will resign tomorrow. I will never come back to Harlem." "You are going to answer my question," Bumpy said. "Or I am going to start breaking fingers. And I am going to keep breaking them until you run out of fingers or you tell me the truth." Whitmore broke. Not slowly. All at once. Like a dam giving way. 3 years, he sobbed. 3 years I have been. I cannot help it. It is a sickness. A sickness. Bumpy's hand tightened on Whitmore's collar. "How many children?" Whitmore shook his head. "Please. How many?" Bumpy's voice cracked like a whip. "I do not know. Maybe 12. Maybe 15. I do not." 15. Bumpy released Whitmore. Let him crumple to the floor like a marionette with its strings cut. 15 children. For 3 years, this man had been preying on children in this school. Black children. Children whose parents worked double shifts and trusted the school system to keep their kids safe. Children who came home quiet and withdrawn and different, and nobody asked why. Because nobody believed that a white teacher from Connecticut could be a monster. Bumpy stood over Whitmore. His hands were shaking, not with fear, with the effort of restraining himself. Because every fiber of his being wanted to end this man's life right now, right here, on this classroom floor. But Bumpy Johnson was not a man who acted on impulse. He was a man who planned. A man who thought 3 moves ahead. A man who understood that killing Gerald Whitmore in this classroom would satisfy his rage for approximately 30 seconds, and then he would be in handcuffs, and his daughter would lose her father, and Whitmore would become a victim instead of a predator. No, Bumpy was not going to give Gerald Whitmore the mercy of a quick death. He was going to give him something much worse. "Here is what is going to happen," Bumpy said, straightening his coat. He was calm again. That terrifying calm that people who knew Bumpy recognized as the most dangerous version of the man. "You are going to go home tonight. You are going to sleep in your bed. And for the next few days, you are going to wait. Because something is coming for you, Gerald. I do not know exactly when. I do not know exactly how. But it is coming. And when it arrives, you are going to understand exactly what you took from those children. You are going to feel what they felt. Helpless. Terrified, alone, and there will be nobody to save you." Bumpy walked to the door, unlocked it, opened it, then he paused. "One more thing. If you run, I will find you. If you go to the police, I own the police. If you tell anyone about this conversation, the last thing you will ever see is my face. Do you understand?" Whitmore nodded. He was still on the floor. Still crying. Still shaking. Bumpy walked out of room 214. Down the hallway, down the stairs, and out the front door of PS 194. The cold March air hit his face. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing. Just breathing. Then he got in the car. Illinois was behind the wheel. Elise was in the back seat, still curled up, still staring at nothing. Bumpy climbed into the back with her. He pulled her close, held her against his chest. And for the first time in 30 years, Bumpy Johnson cried. He did not make a sound. The tears just fell, silent, hot, running down his face and into his daughter's hair. Because in that moment, all the power he had built, all the respect he had earned, all the fear he commanded, none of it mattered. He had failed, his daughter had been hurt, and he had not been there to stop it. That was the thought that would keep Bumpy Johnson awake for the rest of his life. Not the rage, not the desire for revenge. The guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt of a father who could not protect his child. Illinois did not speak. He drove. He looked in the rearview mirror once, saw Bumpy's tears, and looked away. Some things are private, even between men who would die for each other. They drove home. Bumpy carried Elise upstairs. He put her to bed. He sat beside her until she fell asleep. Then he went to his office, closed the door, and sat in the dark for 2 hours. At 11 o'clock that night, Bumpy made 3 phone calls. The first was to Dr. Benjamin Wright, a physician who had been treating Harlem's families for 20 years. A man Bumpy trusted, completely. Doc, I need you at my apartment first thing in the morning. My daughter. I need you to examine her. I need you to document everything. Photographs, medical report, everything official. And I need your complete discretion. Dr. Wright did not ask questions. He understood. The second call was to Maybelle, his wife. Come home. Something happened with Elise. She is safe now. She is sleeping. But you need to come home. Maybelle heard something in Bumpy's voice that she had never heard before. She was on the next train from Brooklyn. The third call was to Illinois Gordon. Get me everything on Gerald Whitmore. Everything. Where he lives. Where he goes. Who he knows. His family. His past. Every school he has ever worked at. Every city he has ever lived in. I want to know what this man eats for breakfast. I want to know what time he goes to sleep. I want to know every secret he has ever kept. And Illinois. Yes, boss. Find out if there are other children. If he did this to other children. Find their families. Talk to them. Be gentle. But find out the truth. Illinois said he would. And he did. Here is what you need to understand about what happened next. Bumpy Johnson did not rush. He did not storm Gerald Whitmore's apartment with a gun. He did not send men to drag Whitmore into an alley. He did not do any of the things that a normal man consumed by rage would do. Because Bumpy understood something that most people never learn. The most devastating revenge is not the kind that happens in the heat of the moment. It is the kind that happens slowly, methodically, piece by piece, until the target's entire world has been dismantled around him and he is standing in the rubble of everything he ever had, understanding with perfect clarity exactly why it happened. That is what Bumpy built over the next 14 days. A machine of destruction so precise, so thorough, so complete that Gerald Whitmore would spend the rest of his miserable life wishing Bumpy had just killed him in that classroom. Day 1. Dr. Wright examined Elise. The examination confirmed what Bumpy already knew. His daughter had been touched inappropriately on multiple occasions. Dr. Wright documented everything with the clinical precision of a man who understood that this evidence might be needed someday. He wrote his report, sealed it, gave 1 copy to Bumpy and kept 1 in his own files. Maybelle arrived from Brooklyn at 7 o'clock in the morning. When she saw Elise, when she heard what had happened, she went to a place inside herself that no words can describe. A mother's rage is different from a father's rage. It is not cold and calculating. It is hot and elemental, like the core of the earth. Maybelle wanted to go to the school with a kitchen knife. Bumpy held her, let her scream, let her cry. Then he said the words that would guide everything that followed. I am handling this. Trust me. She does not need us angry right now. She needs us strong. He was right. And Maybelle trusted him. Because whatever else Bumpy Johnson was, whatever the world thought of him, he was a father first. Everything else was second. Day 2 through day 5. Illinois Gordon delivered his report. And what that report contained made Bumpy's blood run colder than it had ever been. Gerald Whitmore had taught at 3 schools before PS 194. 2 in Connecticut, 1 in Massachusetts. At each school, he had left under what the administrators called mutual agreement. That was the language they used. Mutual agreement. It meant that complaints had been filed, Concerns had been raised, and instead of investigating, instead of calling the police, instead of protecting the children, the school boards had simply let Whitmore resign quietly and move on to the next school. The next batch of children. The next hunting ground. In Connecticut, 2 families had tried to press charges. The local police had interviewed Whitmore, decided there was insufficient evidence, and closed the case. The families were told to be quiet. Were told they were making trouble. Were told that Mr. Whitmore was a respected educator and they should be ashamed of themselves for making such accusations. In Massachusetts, a 9-year-old boy had told his mother what Whitmore did to him during after-school tutoring sessions. The mother went to the principal. The principal went to the school board. The school board went to their lawyer. The lawyer told them to make it go away. Whitmore resigned. The family was offered a small settlement in exchange for their silence. $2,000. That was the price they put on a child's innocence. $2,000 and a handshake. And then Gerald Whitmore moved to New York. Moved to Harlem. Because where better to hide than in a community that the system had already decided did not matter? Where better to prey on children than in a neighborhood where the police did not care, where the school board did not listen, where black parents' complaints were filed in the garbage? Illinois also found other families in Harlem. 3 of them. 3 families whose children had been in Whitmore's class and had come home different. Quieter, more withdrawn, having nightmares, wetting the bed, all the signs that nobody wanted to see because seeing them meant confronting a truth that was too ugly to face. Illinois spoke to these families carefully, gently. He did not tell them who had sent him. He just asked questions and listened. And what he heard confirmed everything. Gerald Whitmore had been molesting children at PS 194 for 3 years. At least 7 children that Illinois could confirm. Probably more. Probably many more. When Bumpy received this report, he sat in his office for a long time. He read every page twice. Then he called a meeting. Not with his enforcers. Not with his soldiers. With the families. All 3 of them. Plus his own family. They met at Bumpy's apartment on Edgecombe Avenue. 4 families, 4 mothers, 4 fathers, children who had been hurt by the same man. Bumpy did not tell them what he did for a living. They already knew. Everyone in Harlem knew. But that night, he was not a gangster. He was a father. And so were they. He told them what he had learned about Whitmore's past. About the other schools. About the cover-ups. About the system that had passed this predator from school to school, city to city, child to child, without ever stopping him. He told them about Dr. Wright's examination of Elise. He offered to have Drive Wright examine their children as well, free of charge, completely confidential. Then he asked them a question. If you go to the police, they will do nothing. You know that. I know that. The system has already shown us what it thinks of our children. So I am asking you, do you want me to handle this? There was silence in that room for a long time. Then one mother, a woman named Dorothy whose 8-year-old son Marcus had been one of Whitmore's victims, spoke up. Handle it how? In a way that makes sure Gerald Whitmore never touches another child for as long as he lives. In a way that makes sure the school board knows they cannot send predators to Harlem. In a way that sends a message that our children are not disposable. Dorothy looked at her husband. He looked at her. They nodded. Handle it, Dorothy said. The other families agreed. Every single one. That night, Bumpy Johnson began building the most intricate, most devastating, most comprehensive act of revenge that Harlem had ever seen. And he did it without killing anyone. Because Bumpy understood something profound. Death is mercy. Death is an ending. And Gerald Whitmore did not deserve mercy. He did not deserve an ending. He deserved to live. He deserved to live a long, long time in the ruins of everything he had ever been. Day 6. Bumpy contacted a private investigator named Samuel Cross, a white man who worked out of an office in Midtown Manhattan. Cross was expensive, but he was the best. More importantly, he was white, which meant he could go places and access records that a black investigator could not in 1957. Bumpy gave Cross a simple assignment. Go to Connecticut. Go to Massachusetts. Find every family that Gerald Whitmore had ever hurt. Get their stories. Get their documentation. And find the administrators who covered it up. Get their names, their addresses, and anything that could be used against them. Cross was gone for 5 days. When he came back, he had a folder 3 inches thick. 11 families across 3 states. 11 children that Gerald Whitmore had molested over a 15-year period. And at every single stop, administrators, school board members, and local police had looked the other way. Bumpy read that folder cover to cover. Then he made copies. Lots of copies. Day 7 through day 10. Here is where Bumpy's genius showed itself. Here is where the chess master began moving his pieces. Bumpy did not just want to destroy Gerald Whitmore. He wanted to destroy the system that had created him. The system that had protected him. The system that had handed him an endless supply of victims and told those victims to be quiet. So Bumpy went to the press. Not just any press. He went to the Amsterdam News, Haarlem's most powerful black newspaper. He went to the editor, a man named James Hicks, who owed Bumpy several favors and who had spent his career fighting for justice in the black community. Bumpy gave Hicks everything. Dr. Wright's medical reports, Samuel Cross's investigation files, statements from families in 3 states, 15 years of cover-ups, documented, verified, and ready to print. Hicks read the material. When he finished, his hands were shaking. Bumpy, this is the biggest story I have ever seen. This goes beyond one teacher. This is a system, an entire system designed to protect predators and silence victims. I know, Bumpy said. Print it, all of it, every name, every school board member who looked the other way, every police officer who closed a case without investigating, every administrator who took a settlement and kept quiet. But Bumpy, they will try to stop us. They will send lawyers. They will threaten the paper. Bumpy leaned forward. Let them try. I will deal with the lawyers. I will deal with the threats. You just print the story. And James, one more thing. When you print it, I want it on the front page. Above the fold, with photographs. Hicks nodded. Then he went to work. While the newspaper story was being prepared, Bumpy executed the second phase of his plan. He went to the school board. Not personally. He sent a representative, a lawyer named Harold Williams, one of the few black attorneys in New York who had the courage and the connections to take on the education establishment. Williams walked into the school board's offices on Livingston Street in Brooklyn carrying a briefcase full of evidence. He sat down across from the superintendent, a man named Arthur Feldstein, and laid it all out. Gerald Whitmore, 15 years, 11 children across 3 states, 3 schools that had pushed him out quietly, and now PS 194 in Haarlem, where he had been molesting black children for 3 years while the school board did nothing. Feldstein went white. This is not something I was aware of. Williams opened the briefcase. Here is what you are going to do. You are going to fire Gerald Whitmore immediately. Not a resignation. Not a mutual agreement. A firing, on the record, with the reason stated clearly. Conduct unbecoming a teacher and suspicion of inappropriate contact with students. We cannot do that without an investigation. Williams pulled out a copy of the Amsterdam News front page, the one that had not been published yet but would be in 48 hours. This is going to be on every newsstand in New York City by Friday. When it is, every parent in Haarlem is going to know that the school board hired a known predator and put him in a classroom with their children. Every politician in this city is going to have to answer questions. Every newspaper is going to want comments. Now, you can fire Whitmore before this story breaks and look like you took decisive action. Or you can wait until after, and look like you covered it up. Your choice. Feldstein fired Gerald Whitmore the next day. But that was only the beginning. Because Bumpy Johnson was not finished. Not even close. Day 11. The day Bumpy went to visit Gerald Whitmore at his apartment. Whitmore lived in a small walk up on East 97th Street, just outside Haarlem. A white neighborhood. A safe neighborhood, or so Whitmore thought. Bumpy brought 4 men. Illinois Gordon, Willie Fish Jackson, Raymond Quick Lewis, and a new addition, a man named Theodore Big Ted Robinson, 6'5", 300 pounds, with hands the size of dinner plates and a quiet demeanor that made his capacity for violence all the more terrifying. They arrived at 9 o'clock at night. Whitmore was home. He had not left his apartment since being fired the day before. He had been drinking. When he opened the door and saw Bumpy Johnson standing there, he tried to close it. Big Ted's hand stopped the door like it was made of paper. Good evening, Gerald, Bumpy said. He walked in without waiting to be invited. The apartment was small. One bedroom, a kitchen, a living room with stained furniture and empty bottles. It smelled like fear and bourbon. Whitmore backed into a corner. His eyes were darting between the 5 men who had just filled his tiny living room. What do you want? I already lost my job. Is that not enough? Bumpy sat down in the one clean chair, crossed his legs, adjusted the crease in his trousers. He looked around the apartment with an expression of mild distaste. Sit down, Gerald. Whitmore sat. He had no choice. You lost your job, Bumpy said. That is true, but you seem to think losing your job is the punishment. It is not. Losing your job is just the beginning. Whitmore started to speak. Bumpy held up one finger. That single finger silenced him more effectively than a gun. Let me tell you what is going to happen to you, Gerald. Tomorrow morning, the Amsterdam News is publishing a story about you. Your full name, your photograph, every school you have ever worked at, every child you have ever hurt, every administrator who covered for you. It will be the biggest story in Harlem this year. Whitmore's face went gray. But that is just the Harlem paper, Bumpy continued. By tomorrow afternoon, every other paper in New York will pick it up. The Times, the Post, the Daily News, a white teacher from Connecticut molesting black children in Harlem. That is a story they cannot resist. By tomorrow night, your name will be on every television set in New York. By the end of the week, every person in this country who reads a newspaper will know your name and what you did. Whitmore was shaking now, violently. You cannot do this. But I already have, Gerald. Bumpy's voice was soft, almost kind, and that is the beautiful part. I did not have to break a single law. I did not have to touch you. I did not have to threaten you. I just told the truth. And the truth is going to do things to you that my fists never could. Bumpy stood up. But we are not finished. Because the truth is only part 1. Part 2 is this. I have spoken to the district attorney's office. A friend of mine, a very well-connected friend, has delivered the evidence to the assistant DA responsible for crimes against children. The families are ready to testify. All of them. The ones in Connecticut, the ones in Massachusetts, and the ones right here in Harlem. You are going to prison, Gerald. You are going to prison for a very long time. And do you know what happens to men like you in prison? Bumpy let the question hang in the air. Let it settle over Whitmore like a burial shroud. Men who hurt children do not have an easy time in prison. You know that, I know that, and I want you to think about that. Every night for the rest of your life, I want you to think about what is waiting for you behind those walls. Whitmore was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Bumpy watched without pity, without satisfaction, without anything at all. Then he said something that Whitmore would never forget. You made my daughter afraid of a classroom. A place where she should have felt safe. A place where she should have been learning and growing and becoming the woman she is meant to be. You took that from her. You took it from 15 other children. You took their trust. You took their innocence. You took something they can never get back. So now I am taking everything from you. Your job, your reputation, your freedom, your safety, your future, everything. And I am going to make sure the whole world watches it happen. Bumpy walked to the door. His men followed. At the threshold, Bumpy turned back one last time. One more thing, Gerald. Do not think about running. My people are watching your building right now. They will watch it tomorrow. They will watch it every day until the police come to arrest you. And if you somehow manage to get past them, I will find you. I found you here. I found your history in 3 states. I found families you thought you had silenced. Do you really think there is anywhere on this earth you can hide from me? Bumpy closed the door, walked down the stairs, got in his car, and drove home to his daughter. The Amsterdam News hit the newsstands at 6 o'clock the next morning. The headline took up half the front page. White teacher accused of molesting black children for 15 years. Schools and police covered it up. James Hicks had written the piece himself. It was 12,000 words. Exhaustive. Devastating. Every detail confirmed. Every name printed. Every cover-up exposed. It included statements from 7 families. It included Drive, Wright's medical findings, It included quotes from school administrators in Connecticut who admitted on the record that they had known about Whitmore's behavior and had chosen to let him resign quietly rather than face the scandal of a criminal investigation. By noon, every newsstand in Harlem was sold out. People were passing copies hand to hand, reading them on street corners, in barbershops, on subway platforms. The anger was volcanic. 300 parents marched on PS 194 that afternoon. They stood outside the school, holding copies of the newspaper, demanding answers. How did this happen? How was this man allowed to teach here? Who was responsible? The principal locked herself in her office. The school board issued a statement that was so full of empty words and passive language that it made the situation worse. Mistakes were made. We are conducting a thorough review. The safety of our students is our top priority. Bumpy had anticipated this. He had Harold Williams hold a press conference outside the school board offices. Williams, standing in front of a crowd of reporters and angry parents, laid out the facts in clear, devastating language. This was not a mistake, Williams said. This was a system that protected a predator because he was white, because the victims were black, because the institutions that were supposed to safeguard these children decided that their reputations were more important than children's lives. By the end of the day, the story had been picked up by every major newspaper in New York. By the end of the week, it was national news. Life magazine sent a reporter. CBS wanted an interview. The NAACP issued a statement of outrage and demanded a federal investigation into school hiring practices. And Gerald Whitmore sat in his apartment, watching his entire world collapse, knowing that there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no one coming to save him. The police arrested Whitmore on March 28, 11 days after Bumpy had walked into room 214. The charges were 12 counts of indecent assault on a minor. The DA's office, under immense public pressure, moved the case to the top of their docket. Harold Williams represented the families as a civil attorney, filing a separate lawsuit against the school board, the previous school districts, and the local police departments that had failed to investigate Whitmore's earlier crimes. The lawsuit sought damages for every family. More importantly, it sought systemic reforms. Background checks for all teachers. Mandatory reporting requirements. Criminal penalties for administrators who covered up abuse. Things that seem obvious today but did not exist in 1957. Gerald Whitmore went to trial in September of that year. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The testimony was devastating. Children, some now teenagers, took the stand and described what had been done to them. Mothers and fathers sat in the courtroom and wept. The defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth, tried to argue that the children's memories were unreliable. The jury did not buy it. Guilty on all 12 counts. The judge sentenced Whitmore to 25 years in state prison. 25 years. In 1957, for crimes against children, that was an extraordinary sentence. The judge, a man named Howard Patterson, made a statement from the bench that was quoted in newspapers across the country. The defendant preyed upon the most vulnerable members of our society. He did so systematically, deliberately, and without remorse. He was aided in his crimes by institutions that chose silence over justice, convenience over conscience. The sentence of this court reflects not only the severity of the defendant's actions but the failure of every system that should have stopped him years ago. Whitmore was taken to Sing Sing. And inside those walls, exactly what Bumpy had predicted came true. Prisoners have their own code of justice. And in that code, men who hurt children occupy the lowest rung. The very lowest. Within his first month, Whitmore was hospitalized twice. Within his first year, he had been attacked 7 times. He spent most of his sentence in protective custody, alone in a cell for 23 hours a day, with nothing but his thoughts and the memory of every child he had hurt. Bumpy Johnson never spoke publicly about the case. Not once. He never gave an interview. He never took credit. He never mentioned Gerald Whitmore's name again. But everyone in Harlem knew. Everyone knew who had exposed the predator. Who had rallied the families. Who had gone to the press, the school board, the DA's office, and the courts. Who had used every tool at his disposal, legal and otherwise, to ensure that justice was not just served but witnessed by the entire world. The families received their settlements. The school board implemented new policies. A commission was formed to Review teacher hiring practices across the state of New York. And PS 194 got a new teacher. A young black woman named Patricia Collins who would spend the next 30 years at that school and would be remembered by generations of Harlem children as the best teacher they ever had. But the real change happened in the streets. The real change happened in the conversations between parents on stoops and in barbershops and at church on Sunday mornings. The real change was the understanding that Harlem's children were not alone. That someone was watching. That someone would act. That there was a line in this neighborhood that no one, no teacher, no administrator, no system, could cross without consequences. Bumpy Johnson drew that line. And for a generation, nobody dared cross it. 6 months after the trial, Bumpy was sitting in his office above Small's Paradise. It was late. The jazz was playing downstairs. Illinois Gordon was in the chair across from him, nursing a bourbon. "Boss," Illinois said, "you could have killed that man. Could have made him disappear. No one would have asked questions." Bumpy was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. "If I had killed him, he would have been in the ground in a week. Nobody would have known why. Nobody would have learned anything. The other predators, the administrators, the police who covered it up, they all would have gone on doing exactly what they were doing. Nothing would have changed." Illinois nodded slowly. "But this way." Bumpy took a sip of his cognac. "This way, every newspaper in the country printed his name. Every parent in Harlem knows what happened. Every school board in New York changed their policies. Every predator in this city knows that Harlem is not a safe place for them. And Gerald Whitmore is alive. He is alive and he is sitting in a cell, alone, every single day, knowing that the whole world knows exactly what he is." He paused. "Death is easy, Illinois. Living with what you have done, living with everyone knowing what you have done, living in a cage where the people around you know what you did to children, that is hard. That is punishment. That is justice." Illinois raised his glass. "To Elise. To all of them." Bumpy raised his glass. "To all of them." They drank in silence. The jazz played. Harlem breathed. And somewhere in Sing Sing prison, Gerald Whitmore stared at the ceiling of his cell and understood, finally and completely, what happens when you touch a child in Bumpy Johnson's neighborhood. Years later, an old-timer on 125th Street was asked about Bumpy Johnson. What made him different from the other gangsters? What made him special? The old-timer smiled. Bumpy was not just a gangster. He was a shield. He stood between his people and everything that wanted to hurt them. The mob, the police, the politicians. And when a predator came into our school, came into our children's classroom, and the system did nothing, Bumpy did everything. That is what made him special. That is what made him Bumpy. And if you ask anyone who grew up in Harlem in the 1950s, anyone who sat in those classrooms, anyone whose parents marched outside PS 194 on that cold March afternoon, they will tell you the same thing. Bumpy Johnson did not just catch a predator. He changed the rules. He proved that power is not just about territory and money and influence. Power is about what you are willing to do when the people you love are threatened. Power is about standing up when the system sits down. Power is about being the justice that the courtrooms refuse to deliver. And the revenge. People ask about the revenge. Was it brutal? Yes, but not in the way you think. There was no blood on the classroom floor. There was no body in the river. The revenge was worse than that. The revenge was exposure. The revenge was truth. The revenge was making sure that every person in America knew Gerald Whitmore's name and what he had done. The revenge was 25 years in a prison cell surrounded by men who despised child predators. The revenge was a scar on the public record that could never be erased, never be hidden, never be explained away. That is the kind of revenge that only a genius could design. That is the kind of revenge that only Bumpy Johnson could execute. Because Bumpy did not just want Whitmore to suffer. He wanted the system that created Whitmore to suffer. He wanted the administrators who covered for Whitmore to be exposed. He wanted the police who ignored the complaints to be named. He wanted the school boards that traded children's safety for institutional convenience to be held accountable. And he got all of it. Every single piece. That is what Harlem remembers. Not the violence. Not the fear. The protection. The justice. The unshakable certainty that as long as Bumpy Johnson drew breath, the children of Harlem had a guardian who would move heaven and earth to keep them safe. March 17, 1957. Bumpy Johnson walked into a school and caught a teacher touching his daughter. And the revenge was not a bullet. It was not a beating. It was not a body in the East River. The revenge was something far more devastating. Something far more permanent. Something that echoed through Harlem for decades and changed the rules forever. The revenge was the truth. And the truth was brutal. And the truth was unforgiving. And the truth is still remembered. Harlem remembers. Harlem always remembers. Now if this story hit you the way it should have, if you understand what real justice looks like when a father protects his child and his community, then do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me, was Bumpy right? Was this the ultimate revenge? Because we are telling the stories that the history books left out. The stories that made Bumpy Johnson more than a gangster. The stories that made him a legend. And the next one, trust me, the next one is going to shake you to your core. Turn on those notifications because you do not want to miss what is coming. Remember, in Harlem, there was one rule that nobody broke. You do not touch the children. And the man who enforced that rule, the man who made the whole world listen, his name was Bumpy Johnson. Rest in power.